The Tide Power is just telling everybody that we should pay more attention on the use of energy in Taiwan, and we are working very hard to develop renewable energy. However, there are some inherited limitations on the development of renewable energies. For example, air conditioning takes the largest amount of power in this season, but this is a season we also have the lowest amount of wind, and the solar power is not stable. Therefore, we need to have a very stable base load serve as the foundation for electricity sources. We work very hard that we can expand our base power so that in case there's an emergency, we can still survive the situation. But now the space for us to do that is getting smaller, so that we have to raise our alert on this issue. Now the executive yuan is hope that every year we can reduce the energy use by 2%. If we could achieve that goal, the situation could be improved. But whether we could achieve that, we are not very optimistic about that, because there are more and more electrical appliances nowadays. And we probably only see the increase of electricity use instead of the dropping of it. So when we are considering energy problem, how can we find an optimal energy mix or energy combination? In other words, how much of the fossil fuels or how much of the natural gas, how much of the renewable energies is what we need to be transformed into usable electricity. Simply said, under the precondition that no rationing of power, maintaining reasonable power price, and also to fulfill our pledge in carbon reduction to the international society, that we can also ensure nuclear safety, reducing reliance on nuclear power, and create a green energy and low carbon environment to gradually become a nuclear-free country. This is the energy policy that I proposed 4 years ago, which is all still effective until today.
Next question, we would like to invite our press from Japan. Any questions from the Japanese media? Please. A restriction on the imports of Japanese food, and Japan was not very happy about it. In the past, President Ma said that over the past 40 years, now we have the best Japan-Taiwan relations, but now our relations are going backwards. So we hope that the EPA negotiations, I believe that will be affected. So I hope for the control of the food and also the EPA negotiations, what are the implications? In addition, the Japanese government is also said that they're going to sue Taiwan to the WTO. If Taiwan is sued at WTO, is it inevitable? My question is that on May 15th, Taiwan has taken stringent control on the imports of food from Japan, and the Japanese government expressed their dissatisfaction. President Ma has been saying that now the relations with Japan has been the best in 40 years. Does this incident affect the Taiwan-Japan relations? And also, as for the EPA negotiation, will that be affected? The Japanese government also mentioned that it is going to press charges against Taiwan at a WTO. What do you make of it? Regarding the prefectures affected by the radiation disasters, as for their products to be exported, many different countries have many different kind of restrictions. In early February, we hope to loosen the restrictions. In addition to Fukushima and other surrounding 4 prefectures, we would like to allow the importation of products from these 4 prefectures. To achieve that, we have to ensure that there are no problems at their origin. It was originally done, but in early April, we found dozens of manufacturers. Their labels of origins were actually falsified. So there now we have a problem. If we do not take any measures to control the situation, how do we know whether the name of the place does not come from the 4 prefectures that we are going to loosen the restrictions? This is the key. under the circumstances. So we hope that by the inspection organizations from Taiwan and Japan, we want to find out the source of the falsification and to prevent future events from happening. But after 1 month or 2 months of inspections, we have found some data. But our cooperation with Japan is not sufficient enough. So we hope we can find out the problem, and we want to make amends as soon as possible so as we can loosen the restrictions. The Japanese side has asked Taiwan to provide scientific evidence. I have stressed again and again that for the food products transported from Japan to Taiwan, some of them may be affected by radiation. After examination, we have found that they have not exceeded the level. In fact, they are within the safety level. So it is not a scientific problem. Rather, it is a legal problem. It is the falsification of the labels. If we do not find out the falsification of the labels, so once we see the labels, how do we know whether it's true or not? For the consumers, the government, for our Congress, we cannot hold them accountable. So we have been working together with Japan. After weeks of negotiation, we want to step up our efforts to find out the results so we can loosen the restrictions. I think that's a more practical approach. We highly emphasize our cooperation with Japan. Ever since I took office, I have designated our ties with Japan as a special partnership. On the one hand, since 1972, we ceased to have formal diplomatic ties with Japan. However, our trade volume with Japan has always been our largest or the third largest trading partner, and we have very close exchanges. Ever since I took office, we have signed 25 agreements with Japan. For example, the Open Skies Agreement, take it for example. Last year, the number of Taiwan tourists to Japan reached 2.97 million, the highest among the foreign tourists. And 1.6 million Japanese tourists came to Taiwan. They're also the second largest source of tourists. So our bilateral ties have been very good, and it has been unprecedented. We do not want to demolish such kind of ties, but if we do not resolve this problem, our consumers may be affected. So the most practical approach is that the investigation bureaus from both sides should cooperate as soon as possible to locate the source of the falsified labels, whether it's made by Taiwan or Japanese manufacturers or both parties were involved. We want to rule out a possibility situation and prevent similar events from happening so we can allow the importation. So this is a short-term control on the importation. I still want to call upon the Japanese authorities and the legal organizations to work with the Taiwanese counterparts. We have every sincerity to resolve this problem as soon as possible. And now the floor is open for questions. Now I see the press from Hong Kong, Mr. Lawrence Chung. Thank you, Mr. President. In 1993, the Kuwang talks held in Singapore. Taiwan and Singapore were one of the 4 Asian tigers, and mainland China's economy was lagging behind. But 22 years later, Taiwan's economic development was one of the last among the 4 tigers. In addition to the factors from the international community, actually, there are a lot of political reasons and factors. For example, the KMT and DPP infighting. So we hope that, and there were some political infightings. We don't know how long it can last in Taiwan. Is there any way that we can seek the cooperation between the KMT and the DPP? What are the methods? In 1992, when the Kuwang talks was held in that year, Taiwan's GDP per capita was above 10,000 US dollars, and mainland China, they were far behind us. But in recent years, especially after the EU debt crisis and the global financial tsunami, Taiwan's economy indeed faced great impacts. And some people even say that Taiwan was no longer a member of the four Asian tigers. But last year, our economic growth was 3.74%, the highest among the four tigers. And the first quarter of this year, our economic growth rate was 3.46%, also the highest among the four tigers. We don't need to be overly satisfied on the results. There's still a long way to go. But the last time when we were among the top among the four tigers, it was 1987. So after so many years, we have to work even harder to improve Taiwan's economic development. And over the past 7 years, we have made huge progress in terms of the cross-strait relations. Is it beneficial to Taiwan's economy? The most important factor is that after the 3 direct links and a cross-strait direct flight, the travel, whether it's for tourism, business, education, it is more convenient and time-saving, and we save a lot more time. In this way, we are very close to mainland China, and it's impossible for us not to engage with the mainland. It is normal to engage with them. It will be abnormal to not engage with them. Over the past 5 years, after ECFA took effect, starting from the tariff, though only 539 items were covered by ECFA from Taiwan, and we have saved $2.2 billion of tariffs. But in terms of the trade effect, our trade increase with mainland China reached 6 or 7%. But for those covered by ECFA, for those items covered by ECFA, they increased by 35%. So apparently, ECFA is very beneficial for promoting trade. Some people, of course, would say that the large volume with mainland China's trade would strengthen our economic independence on the mainland. But in fact, if we calculate our trade with mainland China, including Japan, in 2000, the trade volume accounted for 24% in 2000. But until 2008, when I took office, our trade with mainland China and Japan, including our Hong Kong, mainland China and Hong Kong, account for 40%. So you can see the trade volume increase from 24% to 40%. Some people said that our trade with the mainland will increase to over 50%, but on the other hand, the percentage dropped to 39.7%, and it continued to decrease. So in other words, the total value increased, but the value increased, but the percentage decreased. The reason is because we increased our exports to ASEAN. From 14% to 19%, our export to the U.S. increased as well. We have taken an approach that is want to diversify our export market. And you may not know that our trade and investment with mainland China during the time of DPP government's years, the time of trade increased by 2.8 times. That's the trade and investment increased by 3.8 times. That's during the DPP government. After I took office, the growth in investment and trade with mainland China decreased by percentage. So instead, we diversified our export market and reduced the percentage of economic reliance. For the 23 surrounding nations of mainland China, 17 of them consider the mainland as their largest trading partner. So it's hard to decrease the trade percentage because mainland China is a global, it's a world factory and world market. So it is not a problem for Taiwan, but instead it's a problem for the world. But now what we want to do is that we want to take advantage of our ties with the mainland. On the one hand, they're our largest trading partner. And it is not a situation that only happens after I took office, but in fact, starting from 2003, the mainland has been our largest trading partner. However, we want to develop better ties with the BRIC countries, ASEAN, Islamic countries, and also other countries, so we can balance our trade. In this way, it will be a more reasonable approach. And that is the reason why, ever since I took office, we have taken active measures to sign free trade agreements or economic cooperation agreements with many other countries, because we want to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. And that's the reason why we want to join the REI. We cannot ignore the existence of the mainland. So how can we minimize the risk and maximize the opportunity? That should be our approach.
The next question, we would like to invite the Taiwan media. I'm Ms. Ho from TVBS. What is your take when your popularity have dropped from 7 years ago to right now? After you resigned from us being the KMT chair, they say that you cannot implement your policy outside of presidential office. To Speaker Wang, he is very popular in the people, and some people also said that whether the party will draft him as a candidate for presidential election. What is your take on this issue? Is it your own problem or your implementation system have some problem? Just a week ago, we've seen that the act governing the long-term care have passed, and also we've seen that amendment of the Labor Standard Act. Does it account for, can we take that as that my policy have implemented outside of the presidential office? I think this is a telling example. And we've been also promoting the combined land and property tax. So we've been doing some policies, implement some policies. We are not really a caretaker government, so we will fulfill our policy promises until the last day of my tenure. And about the popularity, in the morning news, I saw that there's a still fluctuation in my popularity, about 20% or 30%. But of course, we should pay attention to opinion poll, but we should not be too bothered by this because opinion polls fluctuate. But what we need to do is to pursue a long-term prosperity for Taiwanese people. When I assumed office, there's a tense between Taiwan and mainland China. And our relationship with the U.S. was very bad, and we have heard senators scoring our president. Even though I was the opposition party, I feel very sad about that. So in the first 4 years of my tenure, I hope that we can make amendments to the situation and to keep up with the international developments. We have improved our relationship with mainland China, and there's no longer tension, so that the two sides can enjoy the close and peaceful relations in 60 years. At the same time, we also improved our mutual trust with the high-level government officials with the U.S., which is very difficult. After I assumed the office, in less than 6 months, the U.S. have agreed to approve the first arms sales to Taiwan. In the past 7 years, there were 3 arms sales to us, which exceed to $18.3 billion, which is the largest in 20 years. On other aspects, I cannot elaborate in detail here, but recently, the National Development Council have made a survey that many of our policies, including the visa waiver policy, the health insurance policy, as well as the strengthening on regulations of drunk drive. I have to emphasize that, of course, I always pay attention to people's dissatisfaction and humbly accept their opinions. But for policy that we must implement, although they might not be welcomed by the people, of course, including the increase of oil and energy prices, if we don't do that, then it will have long-term influence on our society. If we don't do that, we have seen that the oil price have seen this trend. In this past years, so we've paid a very high political price, but I'm still very happy that we have implemented such policies. For other political issues, I think the history will give a fair judgment. The next question, we would like to invite the visiting journalist group to ask a question.
Good morning, President Ma. My name is Philip Remlai from Palau. It's nice to see you again. I met you last year. Came here as a senator, still a senator from Palau. We came here to visit you as a state visit. President Ma, I would like to take this opportunity and thank you and your government for supporting the Republic of Palau, especially on the stimulus grants that you give us every year, and also other grants like scholarships, and also grants for the agriculture. Now my question is, I know you have 2 more years left in the government, so I'm worried about our relationship that we've been having for so many years. And so my concern is, are we going to maintain the same relationship with the status quo as far as economics support? And also the stability of Taiwan to the international. And you know, Palau has been supporting Taiwan government in the UN and also other organizations. I want to make sure that when you leave the government, our relationship will be stay intact. And I'm not just speaking for the Republic of Palau, also for the international press. I'm sure we're here because we have a political or economic relationship with your country. So we're all having the same concern that with the relationship with Taiwan in the long run. Thank you.
谢谢您的问题，有个来自帛琉的朋友。
Thank you. This question from our friends from Palau. I am glad that I have the opportunity to visit your good country 5 years ago, and I was impressed by the beautiful scenery and hospitable people of Palau. Our cooperation with your country, be it in the fisheries, medical service, public construction, or training, have been undertaken. And we have a very close interaction with the high-level government officials with your government. So I can assure you that the relationship between our two countries will march forward steadily. I can assure you that whoever will be the next president will still maintain this stable and prosperous relationship.
Now the question from our domestic press. Thank you, President Ma. You mentioned the arms sales. Following the arms sales issue, I would like to mention about the indigenous manufacturing of submarines. Over the past 2 years, you have made a very important announcement that there will be a very important priority. Do you hope that in your term of office, there will be an important progress for the locally manufactured submarines? For example, what kind of models and what type, and what will we do? And in terms of the submarines, the KMT in the past, during the DPP government, the KMT was opposed to that. And when Suu Kyi was a legislator, it was listed as red light. But until today, the KMT supports the manufacturing of indigenous submarines. And what's the reason for such a great change in your attitude? When serving as chairman of KMT and mayor of Taipei City, I did not object to arms sales. There should be reasonable amount of arms sales. In 2006, in February, I also mentioned that. But in March, when I visited the U.S., I also stressed that. The KMT caucus opposed to the idea that the request for the arms sales was 600 billion NT dollars, but there were only 2 pages of explanation, so that's the reason why we object. After I became chairman of KMT, I emphasized that we want to have reasonable acquisition of arms. After I became president, we have received 3 batches of arms sales from the U.S. We need these submarines, and the main reason is that our Navy will become more comprehensive, and with the existing the Guppy class submarines have been aging. For the 2 other subs that can be maintained, but we still need to acquire new diesel-powered submarines. Is it possible for us to have major progress in terms of the submarines? Actually, we have been planning this for quite a while. After I took office, for all of the necessary weapons that cannot be locally manufactured or replaced, we have the 3 submarines that is defensive in nature, that cannot be manufactured locally. Submarine is one of the priorities. So, in my term of office, I want to make necessary preparations because now we have adopted a dual track approach. That is to procure from overseas and also to manufacture locally, hoping that we can find suitable countries that can sell us submarines. And we hope that will become a very important goal in my remaining term of office. Of course, that cannot be achieved in the remaining 1 year, but we want to make comprehensive policies so that we can continue to achieve our goal for acquisition. The next question, Mr. Zheng from Xinbao. Mr. President, my question is, during your second term of office, your approval rate is not very high, but some people may see you as very negatively and even make fun of you. Maybe have you ever occurred to you that it's not worth to be a president? Do you know why the people misunderstand you? In your remaining 1 year, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Before I go to bed, I do not linger on these problems because I actually sleep very well because I have done good for the government. Maybe the timing for some policies are not very good. And of course, we still need to step up the efforts. But compared to the situation now and 7 years ago, is the situation really that bad? Or the people are more or less satisfied with the status quo? The DPP opposition leader also said that they want to maintain the status quo. If the status quo is that bad, should they maintain the status quo or should they change the status quo? From an economic point of view, our economic situation indeed improved. The world, many important organizations also estimate that our economic situation has improved. Of course, there is a wealth gap. But we want to improve the income distribution. That's the first step because the wealth gap is a relative idea and income distribution is an absolute idea. So by improving the tariff and social welfare, we can improve the income disparity and distribution. Take the household income distribution, for example, that's the 6.8 times. The top and the bottom 20%, you can see the disparity is 6.08 times. And for individual, that's 4.08 times. The 6.08 times is the lowest in 8 years, and the 4.08 times is the lowest in 13 years. We have the best performance among the 4 Asian tigers. That does not mean that we have the smallest wealth gap. A lot of economists told us that the accumulation of wealth cannot be reflected by the distribution of wealth. That's also the theory proposed by Piketty. And his suggestion is that we should have tax reforms. Of course, our goal cannot be achieved in one step. And now we have the combination of the land and property taxes. Some people say that the taxes are too low. Some people say the taxes are too high. But gradually, we want to achieve a consensus in our LY and hoping that we can make some reforms. So over the past 7 years of my presidency, I still have 1 year to come. I will certainly try to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. Like what I said before, we want to build a free and prosperous Taiwan. And second, peaceful cross-strait relations. And thirdly, we want to build friendly ties with the international community. We want to achieve this goal step by step. We have to compare the situation from now and the past. We can see what the cross-strait relations are like in the past and now, what our international relations are like in the past and now, and so that you can make further judgment.
Morning, Mr. President. I am Ms. Liu from the Industrial and Commerce Times. You mentioned that you want that in the future, in the remaining 1 year, you want to fulfill as many political policy goals as possible. In terms of making mainland Chinese tourists making stopovers, establishing SEF and RART's offices in each other's territories, and the completion of trading services agreement as well, trading goods agreement as well as AIIB. Now the election is approaching. What is your estimation of completing all these 4 important cross-strait policies? Could you please elaborate on that? Thank you. I think AIIB, because the articles of agreement will be released in June, so the situation will be clear at the time. Mainland China have reiterated that it would allow Taiwan to join AIIB by acceptable status, and so we will pay attention to that. Second is the trade in goods agreement. There's still negotiations to take, so it will take some more time, but it will not affected by the election. We will endeavor to pass that agreement. The third and the two main issue is making stopovers and also establishing representative offices. Mainland Chinese we've always negotiated with Mainland China about allowing their tourists making stopovers here. But as we often said, that it's very common for Taiwanese people to make stopover in Mainland China and then go to Europe. Whenever Mainland Chinese tourists want to go to Europe or US, they have to make stopovers in Korea or Japan. We think it's unreasonable and it is unequal, because there are many of them want to go to US. If they all make transits at Shanghai or Guangzhou, it's very busy, so it's reasonable for them to making stopovers here in Taiwan. Now, the establishment of representative office in each other's territory have been talked for very long, and it is close to completion, but there's always doubts because Mainland China believes that our intention of establishing representative offices in their territory will have other agenda for that. They always feel that we want to make it like a diplomatic office. But it is unnecessary because the mutual visit made by our people have over 8 billion every year. So you would rarely see that any two political entities who have such a close exchanges but do not have representative offices in each other's territories. So we believe that it is inevitable development. Mainland China also worried that once we've established representative office there, then its representative office here in Taiwan will become the hub for political movement. But we are sure that Republic of China, Taiwan is a country with rule of law, so we will ensure the safety of their staff. So we've been negotiating all these issues, but just as I said, Mainland China have their concern, just as I mentioned. 8 years ago, when I was running for the president, I visited India, and I proposed that that two sides should mutually non-recognize each other's sovereignty, but mutual non-denial of the governing authority. So I believe that this is the best solution, and I hope that this will become a theoretical basis to resolve the problems across the strait.
CCTV, Mr. Wang Youzheng. Mr. President, my question is about the elections. You mentioned that in the primary mechanism, we have a certain mechanism to support whoever is selected. Is Chairman Zhu your top candidate? In addition to Chairman Zhu, are there other suitable candidates? Chairman Zhu mentioned that over the past period of time, he has asked a lot of candidates, and he also talked to you about the suitable candidates. Have you talked about the suitable candidate for the presidential election? If you think Chairman Zhu is a suitable candidate, did you encourage him in person or call him on the phone or talk him into running for presidency through other people? I have said what I have to say. Basically, we encourage those who are competitive to join the KMT primary so we can exert our strength in the primary. Thank you. The next question, Mr. Ni. In the past, Chairman Zhu led a delegation to the mainland, so the opposition also reproposed the issue of the 1992 consensus. On various occasions, President Ma also mentioned the existence of the 1992 consensus. Are you concerned that if the opposition party becomes the ruling party, will the cross-strait relations be affected and thereby affecting Taiwan's external relations and international space? Before Chairman Zhu visited the mainland, he also came to me and I told him that the importance of the 1992 consensus. And during his trip in the mainland, he also fulfilled my expectations. very seriously. So after he came back, I told him that it is a very successful trip to use the party's power to support our policies. If we do have a transition of political power, if that does not respect the 1992 consensus, I have emphasized again that we do not mention the 1992 consensus out of nowhere. In fact, the 1992 consensus was achieved in 1992. Over the past 23 years, the cross-strait relations, I have emphasized that if we adhere to the consensus, cross-strait relations are bound to flourish. Divergence is sure to result in deterioration, and opposing the 1992 consensus is sure to create turmoil. In 1992, we reached a consensus. In the following year, 1993, we held the Guam talks, but in 1994, the Qiandaohu incident took place. The cross-strait relations deteriorated. In 1995, former President Li Denghui visited the U.S., and we have seen the continuous tension across the strait. And mainland China started to have military drill across the coast. In 1996, we had direct presidential elections. Mainland China launched missiles at Keelung and Kaohsiung. The U.S. also sent the fleet to patrol across the Taiwan Strait. So you can see that in 1998, Mr. Gu visited mainland China to meet with Mr. Wang Daohan. In 1999, Mr. Wang Daohan came to Taiwan. But on July 9th of the same year, President Li issued the two-country theory so that the cross-strait relations were also damaged. The two-state theory seriously damaged Taiwan because that was conducted in a black box manner. Even the Mainland Affairs Council Minister Su Qi and the GIO Minister Cheng Jianren did not know about that. So when they respond to the international press, they had such great difficulties. After the political power shift, the 1992 consensus, of course, they talk about it, but they did not respect the 1992 consensus. So cross-strait ties has been suspended for 8 years. The SEF and the ARETS, in addition to their exchange of letters, actually they had no negotiations for the people of Taiwan, and especially the cross-strait direct flight that they needed. There were no progress. So history tells the story very clearly. According to historic experience or lessons, we understand that any politicians, when handling the cross-strait relations, they cannot ignore the history. So I sincerely hope that everyone can understand the situation clearly. Actually, I sometimes feel in any democracy, the leader of any opposition party, when running for presidency or for the head of state, they want to change the status quo. Like President Obama, when running for the election, his slogan is change. But in Taiwan, the situation is different because the opposition leader wants to maintain the status quo. That's proposed by the opposition leader, and of course, the status quo is built by the ruling party for the 7 years. Of course, I'm happy, but sometimes I also wonder if they want to accept the accomplishment that we have made. Is there anything that they want to propose that they can ensure the maintenance of the status quo? Because they may wonder the cross-strait relations are not important. Domestic politics is more important. If the leader thinks this way, he or she has to pay the price because the cross-strait ties have been so close to a point that if there are some changes, people will feel them immediately. Everyone thinks that supporting the status quo is good because they have taken the status quo for granted. There's nothing wrong with it and it's very convenient. But once there are changes, they can feel the changes. So the reason why I say this, I don't want to scare people, but I just want to do what we should do.
Morning, Mr. President. Could you please, Ms. Cho, could you please explain our relationship, your expectation with our relationship with U.S.? For example, we did not have a talk on TIFA in April. What is the progress of TIFA? And in the following time, Ms. Tai will visit the U.S. You happened also arranged a trip. You also arranged a video conference with the U.S. at the time when Ms. Tai was about to land in the U.S. I want you to elaborate on what is your expectation for Taiwan-U.S. relationship in the remaining 1 year of your term of the office. First, I want to clarify that our video conference with Stanford University has been decided 2 or 3 months ago, which was held every year. I didn't know that Ms. Tai will visit the U.S. about the same time, so these two things are not related. Our relationship with the U.S. in the past 7 years could be considered from zero mutual trust to resuming high-level trust. It took some efforts for us to achieve that. I specifically said that when we are implementing our policies, we have to adhere to the principle that's surprise-free and low-key principle. In this way, gradually we can build the mutual trust. So right now, not only on security cooperation, the security cooperation is in the best after the enactment of Taiwan Relations Act, and in terms of economic relations, 2 years ago we've resumed the TIFA talk. So the focus right now is on a bilateral investment agreement. Not long ago, a delegation was sent to the U.S. to join the Select U.S. Summit, and the number of Taiwan's enterprises is the second largest around the world, and the U.S. really felt our sincerity on this regard. As for our bid to join TPP, the U.S. Senate right now is still discussing the TPA, whether it would be passed. We are still paying close attention to that. But afterwards, if TPP negotiation is reopened to other parties, then we hope we have a chance to take part in TPP. So our relationship with the U.S. is really stable and smooth and have a very good cooperation. Currently, on trade, we have to conquer some obstacles, including the import of U.S. pork and beef. But the Ministry of Health and Welfare and the Council of Agriculture will continue frequently with the U.S. And we also hope that the U.S. can have more flexibility on this regard, because if you want to sell pork to Taiwan, in fact, the market is always open, but the only change is that if there's ractopamine residue, then we have a limit on that, because ractopamine for us is still prohibited in our market. So when the U.S. is selling to European Union, Russia, or mainland China, the pork, it does not contain ractopamine. So our market share is actually very small. We hope that we should not damage our trade relation over such a trivial issue. Last year, U.S. extended from being the third trading partner to the second largest trading partner. So we should work harder on our trade relations. U.S. is seeing a strong rebound, so there's great room for us to enhance our trade relations. Many Taiwanese enterprises are interested in investing in the U.S. because some of their practices is in line with our interests.
By the day before the deadline of getting the registered for the presidential candidate, you call upon Chairman Zhu not to evade the responsibility. But still, he said that he doesn't want to run for presidency. Do you think that Chairman Zhu has shouldered the responsibility as KMT chairman? As for the important members of the KMT, some people criticize them as being afraid from the presidential election. Are you concerned about that? As for Speaker Wang Jinping, people say that the reason why he chooses not to run for presidency is because you and your supporters want to block his way. Is it a real thing? I want to emphasize that I do not want to. I want my supporters to stand in his way. I have never done that. As for the KMT primary, Chairman Zhu believes that we should follow the system, and I always support that. So like what I said, we want our competitive candidate in our party to join the primary. Of course, that is just my expectation, and I have no authority to dominate those people to do that. But I hope that the candidate supported by the KMT will be very competitive. That's my high expectation as a member of the KMT. Thank you very much. Due to the time constraint, there are some questions that hasn't been asked, but we still had President has answered a dozen of questions, and I hope you have get your answers. Once again, thank you, President Ma and Secretary General Zheng. Today, this now concludes the reception. Thank you. Thank you very much.
这边补充报告，我们在场还准备茶叙相当多的点心，那请大家不要忘记享用。
谢谢，谢谢啊。